Couldn't hide YouTube. What's good on YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing another video. So I'm bringing a video on the Power Rangers 2000s, the Power Rangers Dino Supercharged episode 18 of the show. Yes, 18. We are getting super close to being done with Dino Supercharged, and it's been good. This episode was a really cool episode. Had some interesting references to some cool things. But anyway, let's get into it. What happens is we end up seeing Sledge. Sees his ship. He's like, what happened to my ship? Why is it in a wreck? Why is it the way it is, or whatever? And they're like, don't worry about it. We're gonna get this thing fixed. Why isn't it flying? He really was wondering, why haven't they fixed it yet? And the thing is that Point Sandra's like, oh, stop, you, like she doesn't care, and she says, you still need to marry me or whatever. And so he's like, all right, I'll marry you if once we get the ship flying again. And also she wants to know, where has he been? Apparently he's been on all sorts of vacations, and the way that what happened was that when he was on the ship, he ended up surviving the crash barely, and ended up finding a whole bunch of green eggs. Those green eggs supposedly are supposed to be explained in the next episode, which I already know what they are now since I've seen the previews for the next episode, which give away exactly what they are, which makes complete and utter sense, and is different from the Japanese. Also, it's just so people are aware, I actually moved rooms, so that's why this location is different. I'm not sure if I love how dark it is right now, but also we're gonna get extra lights in here, so that will definitely help out. But anyway, what ended up happening was, following that, Mr. Navarro, Tyler's father, ends up hearing all this and hearing that they're plotting and how Snide and Sledge are working together. And so what happens is that they're plotting and they're going to try to get the ship to work. And, Sledge is like, but the power hasn't been working, and they've been using the power apparently to cloak the location of the ship from the Rangers. So what they realize is that Snide mentions, we still have the dark energy that we can use to power the ship, which is what they're going to use. So what ends up happening is that with the Rangers, they're doing their own thing, and Shelby talks to Wing about this geo that he ends up finding that's open, and he talks about how it's a great incubator, and she's like, it's just a geo that's very common or whatever, and he explains that he used a geo just like that one to make the Zords just out of a geode, which she is intrigued beyond belief by, and he even offers to teach her how to make a Zord. So he does teach her, and it's pretty awesome. But at the same time, not only does that happen, but then we end up seeing other things go on. I'm trying to think right now what specifically happens in this episode. So, she wants to get married, and she's pushing Sledge to do that stuff, and they're trying to get their plans ready. And eventually what happens is that the villains discuss that they're going to send out Badusa. Now, if you're curious who Badusa is the equivalent to Death Luger from the Sentai, which is pretty awesome to think that they do include him in some way. Obviously, a lot of people were hoping that Death Luger would be Heckle's other form, but no. Anyway, very cool. Badusa obviously is a play off of Medusa, and anyway, what happens is that Badusa ends up attacking the forest, and the Rangers also are seeking to do a onslaught attack. Well, one idea that Chase brought up was to use all the Zords and just attack them head on, but Shelby says to do a sneak attack, which really doesn't work out because Badusa ends up spotting them and they're sensed really quickly, and it's really not that useful. So what happens is that then they end up having to fight him. He has an amulet that can turn each of the Rangers to stone if they look at it, which is like Medusa, which makes complete sense. Obviously, in this case, instead of the hair, it's an amulet. So everyone except for Shelby, Mr. Navarro, and Prince Philip get turned to stone. The only and Keeper's still okay, but all the others, even Wing is turned to stone. So what happens is that they end up having to retreat, and Heckle also fights off Medusa, which is pretty interesting to think that Heckle would join them. And the thing is that they have to hide it at one point, and eventually what happens is that they realize that none of their Zords, they can't use the other Zords, and theirs don't have a cockpit. And in order for them to fight it, they need a cockpit. So what ends up happening is that Shelby has to make a new Zord that can have a cockpit, and she has to look through some Zords, some different dinosaurs to try to find one that she could use. So she ends up finding the Spinosaurus, and she says that she's going to use that as the dinosaur that she will use to fight. That she'll make. So she ends up making the Spinosaur, and what happens is that she does all that, and it's great, and then they have to go and fight Medusa again. This time they end up beating Medusa up, doing a lot of damage and knocking the amulet away, and eventually I believe it was Heckle and Shelby end up destroying the amulet, which then frees all of them. They all then appear. All 7 of them morph, and also you have to remember this. I forgot to mention this. They do get into a Megazord fight. They use the Spino Megazord, which is awesome, which involves Shelby's, and it involves the Ankylosaur and the Pachysord, combining with the Spinozord to create the Spino Megazord, which is awesome to see that finally, and it's great. It was a great appearance by that, and they end up fighting it, and then the other Rangers show up, and then what happens is that they all morph. So you have all 10, which is a huge deal. So it's a big deal, of course. So then what happens is that then they end up having to deal with a whole army of Vivixes and other monsters, and deal with Medusa, and so they're all fighting them. All of them get to use their attacks and fight, all 10, and then eventually Tyler gets to destroy Medusa by using the arms of the combination of the Spinozord, which allows him to use the boomerang, and also I think he uses the the Pachysord, which is really awesome. And the Pachy Megazord combination look, which is just great with the Ankylosaur, that's right. And no, they use the Stegozord, that's right. So what happens is that they end up destroying Medusa, and everything looks good. And this whole episode, Shelby's like questioning her sensibilities, because like she led them to get to have all their friends turn to stone. She came up with a plan and all this stuff, but she made the Zord, which is awesome, and that's really special. So anyway, what happens is that then the Rangers end up having to they end up seeing Sledge go off into his ship with the others. One thing I forgot to also mention was that Heckle during this episode said to them that get off the planet. Word of advice: get off the planet, because whatever Sledge and Snyder are going to do, it's going to be really bad. So that was an important thing, and Heckle's being good, he's being honest, he's always tried to protect his planet. One of the things we mentioned, Medusa mentions that he destroyed Medusa, which everyone talked about over the weekend. It was just like, what? They're even referencing that? Like they did that. They have Medusa, they've done Sentai 6, like Heckle is, from Sentai 6. It's just like, what's next? Are they going to do Vamala or something like that? I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, there have been so many references to the original show, but they're good. They're not ones where it's like dumb references. It's references that make sense, whether it be humming the tune, which happened, I think it was in the first series, which happened in Downcharge, or just these mentions of things. So nice. Just subtle things are just so much better and so much more useful. But overall, it's a really cool episode. Then what happens is that they all are happy and they celebrate and things are good, and then they discuss that they have to go on the ship, and maybe they may have to go to space and deal with the threat that Sledge and Snide provide. So all that happens. Overall, I would say that this episode was a cool episode. I enjoyed it a lot. I am looking forward to seeing how the Edge of Extinction 2-parter will play out, and seeing how things look in the end. I really like the episode. I will say that again a million times over. Snide, Sledge, awesome. All these characters are awesome. There's always the the one thing I completely forgot to mention was that Keeper was the one that gave his spirit to the Spinning Sword, which makes people think, will he become the Talon Ranger? Maybe. I mean, personally, I think, people have discussed how it doesn't happen, but in some ways, that kind of brings up the idea that maybe he was intended on being something like that. I don't know. No, but it was definitely an interesting experience, to say the least. Let's just say this much right now. I like the episode. It was a good episode. It did its job well. Personally, personally, I enjoy this episode. I know I'm talking, I'm a little distracted right now. It's because I'm thinking of other things. But overall, this was a cool episode. I'm looking forward to the big two-parter that should be releasing very soon, to see how things play out with the other characters in the show. I want to see where things progress. I am a big fan of the show, and I am looking forward to seeing what happens. And I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but I do like it, and I'm curious as to how the final 2 episodes will be. And the Ninja Store toys are already being sold on Big Bad Toy Store, so there's a lot of stuff that's already happening, and we're getting close to that time where like the merchandise will be available to the public, so it should be good, and I'm looking forward to things. So anyway, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Cinema 71, and goodbye, guys.